This week, the focus is image compression. Image compression is very important for web graphics because the bigger the file is, the longer it takes to download. So images that are on the web are always in a compressed format. They're always in a web format so that the page will load faster. There's four web image formats. Three of them are image compression formats. So the first format is JPEG, which is an all-purpose compression format that works pretty well with everything. There are some situations where one of the other two will work better. JPEG has different levels of compression that you can set, and the higher the level of compression, the lower the image quality will be. The second type is GIF. GIF works by reducing the number of colors in the palette, and GIF works really great when there's very few colors. So if you're looking at a logo or some kind of illustration that has like one or two colors in it, 3 or 4, and it can be very small if in those types of situations. It also has a transparency feature. The transparency will it does have a jagged transparency around the edge, but it does have this transparent feature. It's also the only web format, the only image format that allows for animation. You can create animated GIFs, which can be used in situations where you can't use JavaScript or load movie files and things like that. So, like for example, HTML email is a good example of when you might use an animated GIF. It's also just simpler to implement. So sometimes if you just have a very simple animation you want to put on a website, animated GIF can work for that as well. The third type of compression is called PNG. PNG 24 is very similar to JPEG. PNG 8 is very similar to GIF. The one real distinguishing factor that PNG 24 has is that it has an alpha transparency layer, or a channel, so that allows for a gradient transparency. So you can make something translucent with PNG files, and so that has a certain amount of utility. It does add about 30% onto the size if you use the alpha transparency. But let's take a look at these in practice. So right now on my screen, there's just a red box. The fewer the colors, the more it can be compressed, and the greater the compression is going to be. So we can look at, so right now this image, because of the size, it's 1600 by 900 pixels. Without compression, it's 4.3 megabytes, which if you were to download would take a little while. It's a pretty large file. So I'm going to go to export as, and this will preview the changes. It's going to preview the effects of the compression. So let's just start with PNG 24. I don't need transparency. So for PNG, it takes it down to 6.4K. So that's quite a lot smaller than the uncompressed version. Yeah, if I do it the smaller, the 8-bit one, 299 bytes. That is a very tiny file. Okay, let's look at JPEG. JPEG at 100% is still a lot smaller, but it's 17.9K, so it hasn't reduced it as much as the PNG. And let's take a look at GIF. 2.1K, so that's still quite small, though somehow PNG, if you select the smaller file, it can take it down even smaller in this situation. Okay, so you can see when there's this one block of color, the PNG did the best job. GIF did a good job, but not quite as small, and JPEG was the largest. Now let's say I'm going to cancel this out, and let's up the ante on here, and I'm going to load this texture on, and I'm going to set the blend mode. Oops. Let's set the blend mode on this to, let's try overlay. There we go. And let's try it. No, I like to overlay is good. Okay, so let's set this to overlay, and so now we have an image that has texture. It's a pretty large graphic that has these different variations. Let's go back. Let's start again with PNG. Okay, so now this same file with the same setting as before, even if I have the same setting as before, it's 1.2 megabytes as a PNG as 8-bit, and with a higher quality 1.8 meg. Now the difference between the 8-bit and if we put the 8-bit on, it reduces the number of colors. So since this image only has it's monochromatic, you're not seeing a big difference here. But if there were more colors, selecting the 8-bit would create banding and other problems like that. So, but in this case, even regardless of which setting, it's still quite large. Let's try, let's go back to our GIF setting again. GIF 611K. It's, even if I zoom in, the quality looks pretty good. 611K, well, that's better than the PNG. Now let's try JPEG. Now JPEG has different quality settings, and like I mentioned already, that the more it's compressed, the lower the quality, the more fuzzy the image is going to be. So at 100%, at 100% quality, you really won't notice a difference between this and the uncompressed file size, the uncompressed file in terms of the image quality. In other words, you could take a professional photograph that could be 100% quality JPEG, print it out, and it would look great. The difference between the compressed and uncompressed is that this has less information in it. So if you were to go to manipulate a JPEG file, even if it's at 100% quality, it's going to fall apart faster. So if you were to say you have a camera and it can save as RAW, for example, that RAW file is going to have a lot more latitude in terms of your ability to adjust it and manipulate it. Then the same image as if you were to save it from your camera as JPEG. But 100% is pretty high quality, and it's really more quality than you should use on the web. On the web, I would usually use something between 50 and 80%. Depending on the image, it will degrade faster. So if it's a pin sharp, a really high quality pin sharp photo, you're going to start to notice softness from compression pretty quickly. If you reduce it if you reduce the quality only a small amount, you'll start seeing softness. But if the image is already fairly soft or isn't perfectly focused, you can compress it quite a lot before you can see degradation in quality. I'm going to zoom in so we can look at it. We can really see what happens to our quality when we reduce the quality. So at 100%, we have a pretty big file. But let's take it down even just to 80%. Now at 80% on this particular image, I can't see hardly any degradation in quality, and it's still and it's smaller. Well, let's take it down to 60%. At 60%, still not seeing any degradation in quality, and the image is quite a lot smaller, 246K. Let's say I was to go down to 50%. still not seeing any problems from the compression, and it has to do with the softness or amount of detail in this image, and it's been reduced a lot. Now let's take a look at zero. If I set quality to 0%, you can see, that 0%, you can see, well, it's been reduced in file size by a lot, but it's produced all kinds of artifacts in the image. So, you start to see that when you get below, you start to see actual artifacts and problems when you go below 50% typically. So, that's how compression works. There's one other file type, which is SVG, which we're not working with in this assignment or in this class, but SVG is a web vector format. So the vectors that we worked with in the vectors we worked with last week can be saved as SVG, and it has all the qualities of SVG of vector graphics. In other words, it can be scaled. It can be scaled, and they can even be manipulated with JavaScript, which is kind of neat. But and SVG files can be very high quality and pretty small as well. Now let's talk about the assignment. So the assignment is to make an image banner and have it fit the specified file size. So if you were to start making your image banner and just start adding stuff and not really think about the compression of it, you're going to find that it's going to be that when you start to compress it, the image is going to be much too large. The file size is going to be much too large to meet the assignment criteria. So what I recommend that you do is go through this series of steps that are listed in the assignment and start with just that blank, solid color, and start adding to it. Start adding details to it. Try the different compression settings and see what you can add and still keep it at that small file size. So that's the challenge that's the compression challenge of the assignment. And you can after you've completed and you've uploaded it, you can also talk about the different steps that you went through in order to make sure that the compression it fit into that you were able to compress it and still maintain a good quality and meet all the assignment criteria, all the requirements.